There was a company store system in most of the towns in southern West Virginia. They usually featured easy credit and inflated prices. If a miner got into enough debt with a company store, the company stopped paying the miner with US dollars and issued his pay in the form of scrip. Company money, good only in the company store. It was an insidious system. A popular song across the country in the late 1950s was Tennessee Ernie Ford's 16 Tons, where he sang about a miner owing his soul to the company store. That was just about the truth for a lot of West Virginia miners. As part of his social agenda, the captain abolished the worst aspects of the company store system in Colwood. He brought in a college-educated manager, Dr. Diva T. Dantzler, a Mississippi gentleman, to make certain prices were kept fair and no miner was gouged. The captain dictated that credit could be given when necessary, but the books were to be watched closely. No miner was allowed to get himself too far into debt. Scrip in Colwood was issued sparingly. Smaller stores were built around the town for the convenience of the population. Under Mr. Dantzler, the big store became a source of town cohesiveness and a social gathering spot. The big store contained a little bit of everything: hard-toed boots, leather utility belts, helmets, coveralls, and the cylindrical lunch buckets the miners favored. Clothes for the whole family, groceries, and umbrellas, refrigerators, baby carriages, radios, and television sets with free installation onto the company cable system. Pianos, guitars, record players, and a record department too. It had a drugstore where you could get Doc's prescriptions and wide variety of patent medicines, and a soda fountain where you could get pop and candy and a milkshake so thick a spoon would stand straight up in it. It had auto parts and lumber, shovels, picks, rakes, and seeds for the little gardens the miners scraped into the sides of the mountains. It even had a limited choice of coffins hidden away in a back room. It was technically illegal to bury anyone on company property, but the colored people had a cemetery somewhere up Snake Root Hollow. My father and the company looked the other way on it. The big store had just about everything anybody in Colwood needed, but would it have rocket fuel? With my cigar box of dollars and scrip left from my defunct newspaper delivery business, I went to Junior, the clerk at the drugstore counter, to find out. Junior was a rotund little man with a cherubic face who was as smart as a whip and liked all over town. When Junior worked on the store truck that delivered heavy things like refrigerators in the afternoon, he was welcome to come right into anybody's house, even though he was a Negro. Most of the ladies loved him, even petted on him a little. He rarely got away from them after a delivery without some tea or coffee and cake. I saw him once in Mom's kitchen admiring her mural. Mom was beaming. It was rumored that Junior had once attended college, which put him ahead of even my father. Junior heard my order and cocked his head doubtfully. "Saltpeter?" he demanded in his raspy voice. "Your folks sent you after that?" "It's for me," I said forthrightly. "Science project. I need sulfur and charcoal too." Junior adjusted his wire-rimmed spectacles and seemed to make a mental calculation. Then he went into the back and brought out a can, each of sulfur and saltpeter, and a 10-pound bag of cooking charcoal. "Listen, Rocket Boy," he said, "this stuff can blow you to kingdom come. I think you know what I'm saying." I mumbled, "Yes, sir," and paid with scrip. I loaded my treasures on my bike and rode home. As I passed a line of miners walking to work, Mr. Dubonnet hailed me down. "I hear you're going to build another rocket," he said. "Yes, sir. I'm thinking about going down to Cape Canaveral and joining up with Werner von Braun." He seemed to brighten at the news. "That's a good thing. You're too smart to stay here." The line of coal cars beside us suddenly began slamming against each other just before being pushed to the tipple. It was as loud as 100 car wrecks happening all at once, but no one, including me, even bothered to look in its direction. We heard that sound every day. Mr. Dubonnet, you're smart too, I said in an attempt to figure out why everybody lately seemed to want me out of town. After the war, why did you come back to West Virginia if it's so bad? He laughed. He had a deep, rich, ho-ho-ho kind of laugh that was wonderful to hear. You got me there, Sonny. He began to walk, and I pushed my bicycle beside him. I guess these old mountains, the mines, the people, get in your blood, he said. When I got back from overseas, I couldn't wait to get home to McDowell County. It's where I belong. There was the thing. He'd hit right on what I'd been wondering about since Mom's backyard lecture. How do you know I don't belong here too? I wondered. He stopped and raised his eyebrows as if I had said the most amazing thing. I guess my ignorance was a continuing surprise to everyone in Colwood. Well, you do, of course, he answered. Anybody raised here belongs here. You can't belong anywhere else. The empty coal cars shrieked as the locomotive, perhaps a mile down the track, began to push them toward the waiting tipple. I shouted to be heard. Then I don't understand why I'm supposed to leave. He stopped again, the other miners passing us by at a hard slog, the shift change hour approaching. Don't you understand? He yelled. In just a few years, all this will be gone, almost like it never existed. The coal cars began to roll, and the noise lowered to a deep rumble. Mr. Dubonnet lowered his voice with them. Even the union can't put the coal back in the ground. I knew I probably shouldn't ask him anything about my father, considering the row I had observed between them, but I couldn't resist. Does my dad know this? Mr. Dubonnet grimaced. He knows, but he acts like he don't. How come? Now that's something you should ask him, Mr. Dubonnet said, his face turning as hard as concrete. Good luck with your rockets, Sonny. He joined the line of men and quickly disappeared, one black helmet and a river of black, bobbing helmets, all going up the path to the tipple. I looked back down the valley at all the houses. Women were out on their front porches with their mops and buckets, waging their never-ending battle against the coal dust. The coal cars kept trundling past until a big black steam locomotive puffing huge gouts of white smoke finally appeared. It churned past, its engineer giving me away. I waved back distractedly. With all this activity, I just couldn't imagine it ever ending. Maybe Dad and I had a similar blind spot. Beside the washing machine in the basement was a wide counter and a deep steel sink. I had decided it would be my rocket laboratory. As soon as I set my chemicals on the counter, the upstairs door opened. Sonny, Mom called, and I yes ma'amed her. Remember what I said? Don't blow yourself up. News in Colwood traveled a lot faster than a boy on a bike. Quentin hitchhiked over on Saturday, and I introduced him to my mother. He made a short bow at the waist to her, an Errol Flynn kind of move I'm sure he had seen in the movies. Mom was impressed by it, however, her hand going to her mouth, almost like a bashful girl's. She rarely baked cookies, but I soon smelled their aroma drifting down from the kitchen. When she thumped down the basement steps with them and 2 glasses of milk, the plate she handed Quentin was piled twice as high as mine. These are marvelous, undoubtedly the most delicious cookies I have ever tasted in the entire history of my life, Quentin told her after a nibble. Mom looked tickled. She wondered what else she could do for us. Nothing, Mom, I answered. I just wanted her to leave so we could get to work. She seemed to want to loiter. If you need anything, just call me. We will, Mom. See you later, Mom. After my mother had gone back to the kitchen, Quentin worked on his cookies for a while I waited impatiently. Finally, He took a final swig of milk, wiped his mouth on his sleeve, and picked up the bag of saltpeter. He looked inside it. "Looks pure," he said. I wonder how he would know. With Dandy and Petite watching us furtively from a dark nook beside the coal furnace, we began to work. First, we mixed up several small batches of what we hoped was black powder and, as a test, opened the grate and threw a spoonful of each into the coal-fired hot water heater beside the washing machine. The ingredients hissed feebly, but it was impressive enough for the dogs to beg to be let out. I opened the basement door and they bolted outside. "What do you think?" I asked. Quentin shrugged. Neither of us knew how rocket fuel was supposed to burn. We decided to test two of our best mixtures inside devices we hoped resembled rockets. There was some 1-inch wide aluminum tubing under the back porch that Dad had brought home from the mine to make a stand for Mom's bird feeders. I appropriated it with a clear conscience, since it looked as if he were never going to get around to it. I hacksawed off 2 1-foot lengths. Quentin called the lengths our casements. We hammered in a short length of broom handle at one open end and then poured in our powder mixes, crimping the other end with pliers to form a constriction the Life magazine diagram called the rocket nozzle. The result was obviously crude, but it was for testing purposes only. We attached triangular cardboard fins with model airplane glue. We knew the fins would probably burn off, but they would at least give our rockets something to sit on. "We need to see how the powder acts under pressure," Quentin said. "Whatever the result, we'll have a basis for modification." I was becoming used to Quentin's way of putting things. What he was saying was that we had to start somewhere, either succeed or fail, and then build what we knew as we went along. It seemed to me, considering all the rockets that I read about blowing up down at Cape Canaveral, that was the way Wernher von Braun and the other rocket scientists did their work too. Without Quentin, I might have been too embarrassed to fail in front of God and everybody. With him, no matter what happened, I felt scientific. Failure, after all, just added to our body of knowledge. That was Quentin's phrase too. Body of knowledge. I like the idea that we were building one.